I grew up in a quiet town surrounded by hills and streams. Our house was small and old, but it felt like its own world. My parents weren't rich, but they were kind and wise. My dad worked hard as a carpenter, teaching me about hard work and being humble. My mom, a school teacher, filled our home with books and stories that sparked my imagination. Life in our town was slow and simple. Everyone knew each other, and community events were important to us. I loved this life, finding joy in little things like the smell of rain, the sound of leaves under my feet, and the birds singing in the morning. One day at the library, I met Mark. He was different from anyone I knew, coming from the city. His family was wealthy and influential, but Mark was down to earth and friendly. We started talking, sharing stories about our lives. He told me about city life, the fast pace, and the bright lights. I shared tales of our town, the yearly harvest festival, and our close community. We often met at a park bench by the lake, talking for hours. The lake reflected the sky as we grew closer. "Anna," Mark said to me one evening, his voice sounding vulnerable. "I've always been around people who care more about money and status. But with you, I found a peace that I never knew existed. You've shown me a different way of life, one that's real and full of warmth." His words touched something deep inside me. "Mark, where we come from doesn't define us. It's who we are when we're together that matters. You've opened my eyes to dreams I never thought I could have." As our relationship grew stronger, Mark shared more about his family, especially his mother. She was elegant but had strict expectations. He respected her, but he worried about how she'd react to us. I reached for his hand, feeling it tremble slightly. "We'll face that together," I told him. Love isn't about backgrounds or expectations. It's about two people choosing each other against all odds. When Mark proposed, it was simple and heartfelt. No big gestures, just a promise of a life together. Looking into his hopeful, loving eyes, I knew this was just the beginning. The night I was supposed to meet Mark's family, I was nervous. Their grand mansion was a stark contrast to my world. Mark held my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Just be yourself. Anna, just be yourself," Mark said reassuringly as we approached his family's opulent mansion. I smiled weakly, trying to calm my rising anxiety. "I just hope your mom doesn't think I'm out of place." Mark sighed, his concern showing in his eyes. "Mom can be a bit much. Just remember, I'm here with you." As we entered the lavish dining room, Mark's mother, Moran, greeted us. She was statuesque with an air of seriousness, quickly assessing me with a flicker of disapproval. "So this is the young lady who's captured my son's heart. Interesting choice, Mark." Dinner was elaborate, with dishes I couldn't even name. Mark's mother, always the gracious host, offered me a plate with a sly smile. "I suppose these dishes might be a bit too sophisticated for your taste, Anna. We can get something simpler if you prefer." I felt embarrassed but managed a polite decline. "No thank you, I'm always eager to try new things." As the evening continued, her comments became more pointed. She eyed my simple dress, my neat and thoughtfully chosen outfit, which I had considered appropriate, was met with criticism. "Is that what passes for evening wear in your town?" she remarked. "It must be challenging to find good clothes on a modest budget." Mark tried to change the subject, but his mother persisted. "Tell me, Anna, what do your parents do? It's always fascinating to learn about different walks of life." I answered, feeling her judgment weigh heavily on me. "My father is a carpenter, and my mother is a schoolteacher." "Oh, how quaint," she replied condescendingly. "Hard-working people, I'm sure. But I suppose they couldn't offer you much in the way of a financial head start." Throughout the meal, she continued to make jabs at my small-town upbringing, my parents' humble occupations, and even my salary, which she had somehow learned about. Each comment was polite on the surface, but sharp enough to hurt. Mark looked visibly uncomfortable, his attempts to defend me only amusing his mother more. As we left, Mark's father, Daniel, pulled me aside with a kind smile. "Anna, you handled yourself well. Don't let her get to you. She'll come around." In the car, Mark apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I didn't think she'd be this harsh." I sighed, my voice filled with hurt and determination. "It's okay, Mark. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I love you, and that's what matters." That night, as I lay in bed, the sting of his mother's words lingered. But beneath the hurt, a resolve was building. This was more than just about fitting in. It was a test of our love and my strength, and I was ready to face it head on. As the wedding day approached, excitement filled the air, but unfortunately, so did growing tension. Marianne took it upon herself to oversee the preparations, seemingly finding pleasure in belittling my ideas and choices at every turn. One afternoon, while discussing wedding plans with Mark and his mother, the topic of the wedding dress came up. I had chosen a simple yet elegant gown that I felt reflected my personality. However, Mark's mother had other ideas. "That dress, Anna, it's so plain. Don't you want to make a statement on your big day? After all, you're marrying into the family," she said, her voice condescending. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a supportive look. "Mom, Anna looks beautiful in that dress. It's her choice, and it's perfect." But his mother was relentless. "Oh, Mark, let's be realistic. This is a high-profile event. People expect a certain standard. Anna, dear, you should consider something more fitting of our family's status." I tried to keep my voice steady, though her words stung. "I appreciate your concern, but I really love my dress. It's special to me." Her response was dismissive. "Well, it's your day, I suppose. But remember, it's not just about you. It's about how you represent us, too." As the days went by, her comments became more frequent and hurtful. Moran criticized everything from flower arrangements to menu choices and even the invitations. Each remark was a subtle jab at my background and my inability to meet her lofty standards. Mark and I had many conversations about this, often late into the night. "I can't believe she's being so difficult," Mark would say, frustration evident in his voice. "I wish she could just see how amazing you are, how you make me happy." I would lie there feeling his arms around me, a mix of love and sorrow in my heart. I knew it wouldn't be easy marrying into his family, but I didn't expect it to be this hard. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within me. My parents and I had worked hard to make everything perfect, despite the constant criticisms from Moran. As I dressed in my simple but elegant gown, I hoped the day would pass without incident. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love and heartfelt vows. Mark's eyes shone with affection and promise as we said our I do's. However, looming over the joyous occasion was the apprehension of the reception to follow, particularly the speeches. As expected, Moran took the microphone, commanding the room's attention. The air was thick with expectation as she began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," she started, her voice loud and clear. "Today, we'd have gathered to witness the union of my son Mark with Anna. Let's say, a person from a different circle." Whispers spread through the guests, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Moran continued, her words sharp and unyielding. "While some may commend Mark for his charitable heart in lifting a beggar from the streets, we must be cautious. It's essential to keep our family's reputation and standards high, not let them be diluted by those who are clearly freeloaders seeking to elevate their status by clinging to a family of higher standing." The room fell into stunned silence. My parents looked at me, their faces a mix of shock and hurt. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. The guests, a mix of our friends and Mark's high society acquaintances, looked on uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. My heart sank, and a profound shame washed over me. Her words, so cruel in public, were more than just insults. They were a deliberate attempt to shame and belittle me in front of everyone we cared about. As she concluded her speech with a forced toast to our future, the applause was hesitant and muted. The room was enveloped in an awkward silence, the joy of the occasion marred by her venomous words. Mark stood up, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Anna. This isn't what I wanted." His eyes were apologetic, filled with a mix of love and sorrow. I looked around at the shocked faces of our guests, feeling incredibly humiliated. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. The atmosphere at the reception was still tense following the disparaging speech by Mark's mother. When his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, a figure of respect and authority in the family, requested the microphone, her poised demeanor and serious expression immediately drew the attention of all the guests. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and firm. Mrs. Eleanor spoke up, addressing the tension from the wedding reception. "I have something important to say. Anna, you faced unwarranted criticism today. Criticism that no one deserves, especially not on their wedding day." I looked up in surprise, and Mark beside me appeared equally astonished. Mrs. Eleanor then turned towards Moran. It seems we have forgotten our own past and where we come from. Let me remind everyone here, especially you, that before you were the lady of this house, you were a maid working under this very roof. It was here that you met your husband." A hush fell over the room. Mark's mother's face turned paler, her eyes widening in shock and embarrassment. Mrs. Eleanor continued, her tone unyielding. "So for a former maid to stand here and scorn someone for their humble beginnings and modest means is not only ironic but deeply hypocritical." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The room was engulfed in stunned silence, every guest hanging on to Mrs. Eleanor's every word. Guests shifted uncomfortably, and whispers began to circulate. Marian sat motionless, the impact of Mrs. Eleanor's words evident on her face. "In this family, we value character over wealth, kindness over status. Anna exemplifies these values, and I am proud to welcome her into our family," Mrs. Eleanor concluded, her gaze softening as she looked at me. The room erupted into applause, a stark contrast to the earlier muted response. Marian sat there completely humbled, her earlier arrogance replaced by a visible sense of shame. To be honest, I didn't feel sorry for her. Mark whispered to me, "I never expected Grandma to stand up for us like this." I squeezed his hand, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. "She's amazing." The rest of the evening felt lighter, the air cleared by Mrs. Eleanor's candid defense. Guests approached with warm congratulations and sincere smiles. I felt that they were all on my side. It felt damn good. As we left the reception hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and belonging. Mrs. Eleanor's words had shifted the dynamics, breaking the tension caused by Moran's cruelty and arrogance. However, in the days after the wedding, there was an unspoken tension that hung over Mark's family like a dense fog. It all came to a head during a family meeting at Mrs. Eleanor's house, where the air was thick with expectation and apprehension. Mrs. Eleanor began without preamble, her voice firm and unwavering. "What happened at the wedding cannot be overlooked. The way you spoke to Anna, it was disgraceful." She'd addressed Moran directly, her eyes sharp. Mark's mother, usually composed, looked smaller somehow. Her usual confidence diminished. "Eleanor, I've already apologized to Anna," Moran said, her voice tinged with defiance. "It's not just about an apology," Mrs. Eleanor retorted. "Your actions reflect on this entire family. You've become accustomed to a lifestyle funded by the family's money without appreciating its value." Mark's father nodded in agreement, his expression serious. "My mother is right. You've lost sight of what's important." Mrs. Eleanor then laid out her decision, each word deliberate and clear. "I've decided to cut off the financial support you've been receiving. It's time you start contributing to this family instead of just taking. You'll need to find a job and learn to live within your means." The shock on Moran's face was evident. She turned to her husband, seeking support. "You can't agree with this. She can't just cut me off like this." But Daniel surprised her. "I stand with my mother on this. You've gone too far this time. It's for your own good." Moran's eyes filled with anger and disbelief, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her new reality. Mark, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice steady. "Mom, Grandma's decision is harsh, but it's fair. You need to understand the impact of your words and actions." I sat there watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of sympathy and relief. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. The meeting ended with Mark's mother in a state of shock, the reality of her situation slowly sinking in. She was obviously used to living at the expense of her family, and the thought of work caused her distress. As we left, Mark leaned in close. "I never thought I'd see the day when Mom would be at a loss for words. But maybe this is what she needs to change." I nodded, feeling a cautious hope for the future. Perhaps this will be a new beginning for her, for all of us. The family reckoning had been tough but necessary. It was a pivotal moment that promised to reshape the dynamics within Mark's family, hopefully for the better. The honeymoon was a welcome escape for Mark and me. As we walked along the sandy beaches, the soothing sound of the waves provided a much-needed respite from the recent family turmoil. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Mark wrapped his arm around me. "I'm sorry our wedding turned into such a drama, Anna. I wish things had been different." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "It's okay, Mark. It wasn't your fault. What matters is we're together now, away from all that stress." Mark sighed, looking out over the ocean. "Yeah, but when we go back, We'll have to face the reality of my mom's situation, Mark said as we prepared to return home from our honeymoon. I nodded, understanding his concern. Maybe this will be a chance for her to grow, to see things from a different perspective. We spent our days exploring and our nights talking about our future. The challenges we had faced seemed to strengthen our bond, reaffirming our love for each other. On our last night, as we packed our bags, Mark looked thoughtful. You know, Anna, everything that happened made me realize how important you are to me. I can't imagine going through life with anyone else. I smiled, touched by his words. I feel the same, Mark. We've been through a lot, but it's only made our relationship stronger. We can handle whatever comes our way as long as we're together. As we headed back home, I felt a sense of peace. The honeymoon had not only been a break from the chaos, but also a time for us to solidify our bond, to prepare ourselves for the new chapter in our lives. We were returning to a changed reality, but we were doing it together, stronger and more united than ever. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with Mark by my side. Coming back from our honeymoon, Mark and I were unsure of what awaited us at his family home. The car ride was quiet, both of us lost in thoughts about the new family dynamics. As we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the absence of Mark's mother. Inside, we were greeted by his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, who wore a knowing smile. "Welcome back, you two. I suppose you're wondering about the changes here," she said, her tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. "Yes, where's Mom?" Mark asked, looking around. Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath, her smile still in place. "Well, after you left, Moran caused quite a scene. She demanded that I restore her financial support. When I refused, she decided to leave. She's now living in a small apartment and, from what I hear, is looking for a job." Mark and I exchanged glances, the news sinking in. It was a drastic change from the luxurious life she was used to. "And there's more," Mrs. Eleanor continued, leaning in as if to share a secret. "Your father is considering a divorce. He's had enough of her antics. Seems like she finally pushed him too far." Mark's expression was one of shock mixed with a hint of relief. "I can't believe it. I mean, I knew things would change, but this is more than I expected." I reached out, touching his arm. "It's a lot to take in, but maybe this is for the best, a chance for everyone to start fresh on a more honest footing." Dinner that night was an oddly serene affair. The absence of Mark's mother was felt, but not in a way we had anticipated. The conversation was more open, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like there was a real sense of family. As we drove home later that evening, Mark was pensive. "I always hoped for a change, but I didn't expect it to happen like this. It's going to be a big adjustment for Mom." I nodded. "It's a tough situation, but maybe it's a necessary step for her to grow and for your dad too, to find some peace." The ride home was reflective, both of us contemplating the new reality we were returning to. The family we left before the honeymoon was not the same one we were coming back to. It was a sobering thought, but in many ways a hopeful one. Change, though painful at times, was often the path to something better, and we were ready to face it together.